I was born in Nuremberg, Germany, although that doesn't really matter. I mean, I was raised in Ohio since I was 2. My mother is Korean, father African American. Um, yeah, I'm a Midwesterner, I think by birth and I think by temperament. And I ended up in Korea actually after being interested in race, mixed race identity and stuff like that, mostly in college. Somewhere at the end of college, realized that me being half Korean, I didn't really know what that meant. I know things about Korean culture, food, you know, ephemera of Korea, but I felt like as much as I talked about that, I don't really know anything about Korea. I don't know what I'm half of. Ended up getting a Fulbright English teaching assistantship, teaching English in Korean middle schools from 94 to 96 after college and with a host family. Kind of got a sense of what Korea was about. So after 2 years of being in Korea, went to grad school at Berkeley, ethnic studies. Ended up trying to do my dissertation on Korean national identity and textbooks and how that's constructed. So was in Korea since 2002. Ended up doing street photography, then street fashion, then more into fashion from like 2002 to 2000, well, continuously, and didn't finish my dissertation until 2014. Kind of came back to academia from 2014 and have mixed everything together, the photography, ethnographic view of fashion, into being a visual sociologist. So that's what I do now. I ended up in Korea in 1994 after college. There was this program, and I said, oh, I'll go and teach English and live in a host family and kind of live a Korean life. Korea in the 90s, what I like to call the last years of real Korea, like sang, like hardcore, unadulterated, unfiltered Korea, where people just be like, you're a foreigner, you're fat, what's your problem? People you don't know are like, why don't you lose weight? I'm like, who are you? Why are you talking to me? Yeah, I mean, racial difference, any difference was not acknowledged, and it was seen as a pretty big negative to talk about. When I came to Korea back in the 90s, originally I had pretty low expectations. I did not expect to learn Korean conversationally, comfortably. That happened after about a year and a few months in. It really just flipped into place after great effort. But I expected to find out something about Korea because I realized everything that I would talk about, oh, I'm half Korean, I'm of Korean descent. I'm like, what is that? What is Korean culture? Unless I, how can I talk about that as if I know something about it? I co-founded a group called BOMS, the Brown Organization of Multiracial Biracial Students, when I was at Brown. I remember talking about multiracial identity in this fractional sense of quarter this, some people are quarter this, half that. I'm like, half of what really? Like, what do I know that's concrete about Korea such that I know half of, or I am half of something? So I kind of wanted to come to Korea to kind of figure that out. Figured out that I was asking all the wrong questions. It was a very identity politics kind of me. What does this mean for me? And I realized Korea doesn't really mean much to me in this kind of like foundational sense. It's just a place with a culture, a society that has its own norms and all these things that I'm not a part of. When I realized what Koreanness is, I realized that I don't really have a lot of it. I'm American. That's what I realized. And that's a common thing you hear from people who go over to Korea, who are of the diaspora, who are like, I want to find the Holy Grail and figure out what it means to me. And then it's like this revelation will happen. And then the revelation is usually, you're American, much more than you think, defined by one time Saturday morning cartoons, Pop-Tarts, bad food, bad culture, commercialism. And at that time, Korea didn't have a lot of that. That's why I kind of call it a purer, like saying original Korea. Yeah, that was a very different time. Um, very different Korea. I came back to the States after the Korea experience because I realized, I got in my head that I have to go to graduate school. I have to go to the Berkeley Ethnic Studies, and was very interested in issues of not so much social justice. I think that's kind of a cop-out for me, but I mean, I'm more interested in like the theory, the history, than being an actual social justice warrior. So went to the lefty liberal program at the most lefty liberal university that you can find, and did all my coursework, took my quals, came out to write my dissertation in 2002. I had other questions, other things, other ways I wanted to attack the question of national identity or identity, and ended up more interested in actually gender identity and kind of feminist theory to apply. Because if you think about Korean society these days, everything, to the extent that Americans are obsessed with thinking about race, 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 Koreans are thinking about gender, 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 sex, sexual identities. How does gender, how do you define, where do certain things begin and end? How do we socially control women in this society? And how has kind of like a social disciplining of women been a constant through Korean media, governmental policy, all this kind of stuff. So to me, that's pretty interesting to try and kind of make sense of photographically. And in getting involved in the fashion industry, it's become a little bit easier to make sense of. One of the first things I got interested in as a sociologist, visual sociologist, photographer, was looking at prostitution. In the Korean news, it was popping up in 2002, 2003, like crazy. The size of the prostitution, sex work industry. I think it was something like 4% of the GDP. Agriculture, fishing, mining, and agriculture made up like 3.9 or so. Prostitution, sex work made up a larger percent of the GDP than traditional industries that are considered important parts of the economy. So I was like, hey, your own newspapers, your own government bodies say this is, size this up as a huge part of the economy. So why aren't we talking about it? And I would, talk about this in classes I was lecturing in and things like that. And people, got angry. When I had a small exhibition, I had a picture of a prostitute a sex worker in the red light district at Cheongyangni, in the midst of bringing people into her glass booth. People at the exhibition got visibly, shakingly angry and were like, you're 나라망신, you're embarrassing the country. You can't take pictures like this. And then I would, because I was younger and just didn't care, I would get into arguments and I would say, hey, Chosun Ilbo said it's 4% of the GDP. Don't blame me. I'm just taking pictures of it. And they would get more angry and, almost like fist fight level. But yeah, I got a lot of pushback when talking about issues of national identity, race, discrimination, gay people, stuff like that. The line, there are no gay people in Korea. And I would just say, no, I met some. I talked to them. In fact, my first Yagwan in the Fulbright ETA program in the summer, before we went to Gangwon-do, we were there in Seoul for a few weeks. All the people coming into this little love motel, I didn't know it was a love motel. This little cheap dive motel were like dudes, like guys in suits after work coming in, going into the rooms. And I was like, oh, I guess they're salarymen and they're tired. But that's what Korean people would tell me. You're not seeing things right. At night, though, the basement would turn into like a nightclub, kind of a cabaret. Clearly, men would be coming up in like cabaret dresses and, talking to people at the door and saying, oh, do you want to come in, oppa? I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But I do know one thing. This is gay people in Korea. I've seen this stuff going on with my own eyes. You can't tell me that these people don't exist. People didn't like when I say stuff like that. So I just, as a social scientist, as a very interested person, as a photographer, I would say, I see things with my own two eyes, and I'm not just gonna act like they don't exist. That gave me ample things to take pictures of. Eventually, once I got more, I guess, finely focused on things, I started using my street fashion as a way of trying to draw a picture of what gender and gender boundaries look like in Korea. I think the photography is really powerful, and I think that's, I've always been going in that direction, the photography. When coming to Korea, I had something to apply it to because I suddenly had a lot of people telling me the things that I said I saw, I didn't see. So I'm like, I saw it, and people thought I was either lying or crazy. Yeah, I see things. If I could take a picture of it and, protect privacy or whatever, you can't, if I have a picture, I can say, you can't tell me I didn't see these people or I didn't talk to these people. How are you going to tell me there's no prostitution when there's a red light district with glass and people walking by? And even with the pictures, people would tell me, oh, what you think you saw, you didn't see because you misunderstood it because you're a foreigner. So I think that kind of focused not only the photographic practice, but also the context I have to give to it to talk about what's really going on. One story I can tell of several people, because I published a story on the after effects of the 2004 special anti-prostitution law in the Korea Herald, and I published a big Cheongyangni picture and actually interviewed sex workers who at the time were being interviewed a lot by the Korean media, and I was the first one to be like, okay, I'll just take them at their word, because they really didn't want to talk to the media anymore, because the media would come in, Korean media would come in and set up these narratives like she's a poor, beleaguered, prostitute, and she's gotten training by an NGO to like sew her own clothing. Now she has a clothing shop. That never happened. I mean, it maybe happened a couple times, but they're really sick of being made to be these kind of like patsies to make Korea feel better. And I'm like, tell me about why you got into it. What are the economics? So I interviewed a Cheongyangni sex worker, and she was like, yeah, I'm pretty popular. I have like 10, 12 customers a day, which is a lot, even for that. And she's like, yeah, I'm trying to open up, sorry, Yongsan, not Cheongyangni. I'm trying to open a kalbi restaurant and get the money to put that down myself. And it wasn't really like the typical sob story. I'm a medical student, putting myself, the American stripper story. But it was more like, I'm trying to gather the capital to get myself a business that I can take with me and use and benefit from well after my shelf life as a prostitute, as a sex worker is finished. So I was like, okay. And I heard that from several other people and matched up with statistics and stuff like that. So I just said, let me just publish what you said and take you at your word. And I got attacked for that as defending prostitution. Yeah, as an outsider and an insider, I think there are advantages. I think and disadvantages. That particular story, I could publish because I was an outsider. But I think because I was an insider and that I kind of understood, I'd photographed that area, talked to people, could speak the language, could approach people without them putting up their shields, I was able to tell a real story. In the final summation, I guess, after all these experiences and stuff, I now view myself pretty literally as an American, because I realize my thinking is very American, even though it's tempered with Korean things. I'm very Black American. I realize so many things define myself as such in Korea, because you can't be American in Korea without being Black American in Korea. I think if you are here in a certain way, everything I do, photography, writing about Korea, what have you, is in a way studying Korea as an outsider, because I'm a perpetual outsider. I'm just a Black American in Korea doing academic stuff. So my identity has kind of become very literal and concrete that way. My name is Michael Hurt, and this is my Korean American story.